Aloha and welcome back to the podcast. I am thrilled to have you join me for another week. Today's podcast, I have a really special guest today who is my sister-in-law, and we are going to dive into a really meaningful and deep exchange. I have no idea yet where it's all going to go. But I really wanted to start this podcast with some of my thoughts that are emerging. I really began, with the invitation from Dean Walker to begin interviewing women who are mothers, to really begin the parenting conversation that, will invite many guests to come onto this show as this ecosystem of awakened voices. And what I'm discovering as I set into, as I created this intention for the podcast, I really didn't want to carry with it an agenda or an outcome. So it was more like being an explorer and just beginning and seeing, the times where we're weaving through the forest and there really isn't a lot to be seen, and then coming to clearings where you can, have more clarity and see. So what I'm beginning to really come to recognize as I interview these amazing, amazing women is that parenting really is, it's a nominalization. You can't put a pound of parenting in the trunk of your car. It is something that we have crafted and created, and it's lineages of what we've either done as a replication or we have done as not that. So really what my intention behind this podcast is to really introduce, if we stand in the now and we are deeply connected to ourselves and we are in the process of reclamation of and deep acceptance of who we really are in the world, our parenting, how we engage, the intimacy that we have with our children is just a natural byproduct. And that challenges and things that we tend to bump up against are really invitations to take a look at ourselves, to discover what the intelligence is behind our responses and our reactions. So when I was thinking about this podcast with Raina, I really became aware that, at that moment of creation, the moment, that spark of light of conception really is life, the life that we are in connection with a physical body. And when you think of it in that way, it really is magical. It really is that we are life. We are life expressing through physicality. And so much of our parenting practices in the past have been almost a contradiction to that, almost a way to manage and control that connection, whether it's through command and control parenting, whether it's through encouraging gratitude instead of the truth of our own experience. And what I've learned through years of facilitation with others and also my own personal journey is the ability to be present, to have our awareness, our body, and our experience all together in the same place at the same time is what invites presence. It is what invites the life and the aliveness that we are to move through our bodies. And, what we get to engage from there really becomes the fun part. So without pre-framing this conversation today, because I have no idea where it's going to go, I am thrilled to be in conversation with Raina today, who really is this incredible force of nature And she and my brother and their two daughters live in this beautiful piece of land in Nova Scotia. So their connection to the land and their intention around building a food forest and raising their children in this space, especially in this time where so much is unraveling in the world. And so I think that we're really gonna dive into that connection that we have to life itself. That really we are not an aspect or a metaphor of Mother Earth or Gaia. That we are the thing itself. And from there, we get to really have a very different parenting conversation. So I will bring Raina on and let her introduce herself in the way that she would like to be known in this world. Aloha, I am Naomi Irons, and welcome to Conscious Parenting in a Time of Stolen Dreams podcast. A podcast that is a vision for what is possible for all our children on this planet at this time. It is a place where we are invited to become more than our histories, so that we might become expressions of human potential and the birthright that we all carry. It is meant to become a gateway for us to create a life-giving world as we dare to redefine ourselves beyond our own unchallenged and often unchecked self-imposed limitations that live buried in a lineage of stolen dreams. Well, Rain, it is just an honor to welcome you to the podcast. And we just listened to the introduction together, and that was really a really meaningful way for me to start this. And so I really want to turn this over to you and have you introduce yourself the way that you want to be known in this world. And we're just going to go from there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and I've felt more and more enlivened in my body as the day has gone on, leading into this time together. And then listening to that introduction of yours was really just this like, oh, you're in the right place, like right where I need to be. And who am I? My name is Raina, and first I am a woman having this human experience in this incredible body. And I know that I am not my body. And when I come into conversations like this, that allow me to connect so intimately to an expansive expression of myself, I'm reminded of that all over again, and what an honor it is to live in a body and expand out beyond it and play. And the invitation into this conversation feels playful for me, and also really big. I want to be remembered as somebody that was deeply connected to the soil and the earth, and connected to something larger than each of us, and something larger than the physical. And all of this matters so much to me for myself and within my family, with my children. And I think I have this beautiful nervousness that I feel right now as I come to realize I've never really talked to anybody about parenting in this way, or how I parent. There's a fairly surface level parenting conversation that I feel like is very common. But in the ways that I feel that I might choose something different when it comes to engaging with my children, I've never really lifted the lid off of that and really played in revealing and discovering what's more for me in all of this. So I think, yeah, there's a nervousness of like just kind of revealing how I do this.
I love that. And I love that, you know, this gets to be playful. And I remember when I had sent you the email to invite you on, I really felt this like leaning in, like this invitation for us to be really revealed. And so I hear your excitement in that. I hear your, it's like being on the edge of new discoveries for myself. It's always this really exciting and yet unknown place. So I think where I want to start this conversation is really when you consider yourself and your journey. And, you know, we both have had the privilege in being in many experiences together through the Well Systems body of knowledge. And what I hear you talking about is, you know, coming to know the expanse that we are within, you know, this physical realm, within being on this planet at this time. So when you consider that for yourself and you consider what awakened or conscious parenting, what your connection to that is within yourself and in your world, what pops for you? What are some of the things that start to come to the surface for you?
An experience I had earlier today with my daughter. I think so, an awakened conscious experience of parenting. For me, it means taking the time, carving out the time in the moments that need space and need a modeling of a different way. And I know that my children reflect back to me what it is that I need to discover next. And my daughter, I have a almost 9 and 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old was just so intense and throwing things and angry, and she just needed to be seen. And I was busy. I was trying to meet this deadline. I was like, no, trying to do something. But I knew without a question, I could not turn my back on all that she was feeling because she simply needed to be seen. And I haven't always made this choice, but I chose to turn to face her and hold out my hands. And even though she didn't come to me right away, and she was still throwing and she was still angry, the space was there for her to be seen. And so allowing that time for her to turn and face me when she was ready, and to soften into my body, and to start to allow the breath to flow, and for her body to start to metabolize the feelings she was experiencing. To have her allowing that on top of my body, that is my conscious parenting. And that, I know I don't always choose that. And it feels, when I don't choose that, it feels like I'm operating from an old paradigm, possibly from my past. I don't always need to know, but it doesn't take me where I'm wanting to go. It replicates what I've known, and that's not enough. That's not enough. So yeah, that example, I hope, can kind of convey what I think conscious parenting can look like. And then like snot and tears and face to face, and we're looking into each other's eyes, and a moment later she just starts cracking up and everything's hilarious and we move on. And if I can allow that for myself over and over again in my life, and if my children can, it creates a different reality.
I love that, because it really, as I listen to you, what is occurring to me is this notion of intensity. And as women, you know, historically, intensity has always been something that has either been welcome to be, you know, fighting the good fight outside of ourselves, or, you know, really we've really been encouraged to manage it. So what I hear you talking about is the full embrace, the full acceptance of your own daughter's intensity. When you think about your own journey, and you think about your journey to, you know, the reclamation, and what I mean, you know, to those that are listening when I say that, is that embrace within ourselves of our own intensity, our own connection to, you know, the full flow of life. I think that children really, really invite and encourage and represent in our world that has been, you know, pressed down. That lid has been so pressed on, to manage states of being, you know, for very specific reasons. And a lot of times it's because it's what it unearths in us. So when you think of your own journey with your intensity, what comes to mind for you?
Well, it's been a long journey to embrace my intensity. And as evident in my experience with Eula today, I have come a long way to be able to see her intensity as beautiful and something that can take up space, an expression of her being in that moment. I was not always there, and I still have moments when I'm not. There's still moments when my children trigger the shit out of me, and I can't go there simply because what's rising in me is such an intense feeling, and I don't want to go there within myself. And along my journey, I learned very well how to tone that down, so much so that I didn't think I was an intense being or had intense energy ever that lived inside of me. Because before I even let an intense feeling brew, or it was like locked down in the body. Because some of the things I witnessed as intensity were not necessarily safe to be around. So I disconnected from that aspect of myself. Come to find out, my body can handle all of that. And when I embrace everything I feel in my body and create space for the movement and flow of it all, I'm safe and I'm different on the other side. So the two, my own journey with my own intensity, and my relationship with the intensity of my children, the two go hand in hand. It's like the more I allow myself to be the intense being I am, the more I have capacity to hold space for my children when that comes for them. And there's times when, I mean, I realize I share that story about Eula today. In a way, it's from my perspective, it's a nice story. I stopped, I took the time, like we came through it together. There's times when it's super ugly for a long time before it's not. And so sometimes my intensity is messy. Sometimes I have to let it myself get so riled up or so heated before I'm at a place where I have to take the next step over my edge. And it's okay to do, it's okay. Sometimes it's messy. What's not okay is spewing my intensity onto somebody else. And so that's probably one of my biggest challenges with my children. I know well the experience of this kind of habitual wanting to shut them down, and with my own intensity, and nothing feels more wrong in my body. I've done it. I'll probably do it again. Whether it be like harsh words or whatever intense expression I have. So, yeah.
Well, and I think this is the power of this conversation for me, really is in our honesty, in our willingness to be seen in all of us. You know, the as Louise has said for years, the magnificence of our imperfections. And I think that is the constant invitation to the recognition of being present to ourselves first, you know, and what that takes, you know, that moment where the intensity is rising and we stop and we take a breath and we recognize ourselves. I think that's what I hear you saying. And it doesn't always mean that our response is immediate in that. Yeah. But that is the intention. And I think that's what we're talking about. And so as you were sharing that, it brought me back to the introduction and really, you know, introducing you, Raina, in such a big and loving way as a force of nature. And really, I can't think of a better time to have this conversation when, you know, our economic systems and our, you know, the ways that we've been living on this world are really beginning to crumble. We're beginning to see now that how we've been with ourselves, with the planet, with our children, in the relationship that we have, that when we come back to the relationship that we have with ourselves, that this is really where we start. And that our relationship that we have with those around us and the land really aren't held as separate anymore. It's like this invitation to come to know ourselves greater. And as much as like we're at this time on this planet where we are witnessing and experiencing what we are, it's like you shared at the beginning of the podcast, to know ourselves as these powerful, immense beings And really, in so many ways, personally for myself, intensity is that reclamation of personal power at a time where personal power is really seeking to be um, something that we're not given choice about anymore. And so I think about all of these connections and what we're talking about. And recently for myself in conversations, recognizing that we are not a metaphor of Gaia. We are Gaia. We are this incredible network that is deeply connected. And I think that as we awaken, this intensity really is this invitation for the reclamation of our personal power. And I think for me, it comes back to the fundamental of my personal truth. It's like what we're doing on this podcast right now. It's like the willingness for each of us to be such different beings, and yet we find this synergy and we find this connection to ourselves through this conversation. And for me, that's always the magical part. So I want to go back a little bit to kind of the beginning of, this COVID time. And I'm curious, what was that like for you as, we began to go into quarantine? And really, I think for me, it started to become this bifurcation or this choice point, this really powerful time of choosing whether I was going to be externally referenced, whether I was going to be, aware of everything and all the perspectives and truths outside of me, or whether I was going to come home to myself in what felt right for me, what felt right for my family. What did you become aware of in those beginning times?
Definitely a dance inside of myself that kind of swung from external and internal, which were two vastly different experiences. Yet I was experiencing both. In that I was trusting my own inner impulses and listening for what was right for me and my family, and then doing a scramble like externally. So what's really going on, and calibrating for the news and taking in information and trying to make sense out here. And I could feel a disconnecting inside of myself when I would swing in that direction. And it was like each time I swung over back to myself and my body and my own power and my truth, I started hanging out there longer, which is where I generally dwell, how I move through my world. But the beginning of COVID-19 and staying home, and it definitely had me challenging that, my way of moving through the world in bits and pieces. And then that part just stopped for me. I could feel where it was life-giving and where it was life-destroying. And I chose life. And the last weeks, I know that this is a extremely challenging, horrific time for many in the world. but I've never experienced such magic. And on a personal level, at home with my family, on the land. And I mean, it's just been, as much as I have been on a journey of waking up inside of myself over and over again, we both know that never ends. This time has just accelerated my evolution, accelerated me into a clarity that has me parenting in a way that matters so deeply to me, that has me in countless experiences of what I think, when I hear you describing, this is not just a metaphor that we are Gaia, or of surrendering to the land we call home here and breathing with her, and not like allowing the boundaries or the allowing everything to blur, and really feeling the earth and feeling myself as the earth. And so much of what I am co-creating with the earth in this little pocket of the world is inspired by permaculture principles. And a lot of what we look at in permaculture is that each being, whether it's a plant or an animal, has a unique expression and a unique pulse in the world. And in a thriving ecosystem, everybody is expressing their song. And because of that, everybody thrives that much more. And everybody's song is amplified in this whole. And so I feel all of that inside of my body. I feel that in so many conversations that I've had, some of them with you during this time and other women, where it's just this sense of those who are ready to fully step into themselves in a way that is co-creating a new world. We're rising up into this right now. And for me to be witnessing that in the plant life and the food forest sort of beginning to fill in right here is this like delicious extra layer.
Oh, I can feel you, Raina. You know what really stood out for me is when you said, I choose life. And I think that is what I'm witnessing, you know, not just in myself and in my own family, but on this planet right now. And I watched a brilliant short monologue by Zach Bush. I really encourage those who are listening to listen to it. I'll add it to the show notes. And really what he was talking about is so much of what I think you're conveying in your unique song, because I love that. I think we're all that. And I think that my hunger to have this conversation around parenting is our children come into this world with a song, their own unique song, and to create the space to really create a nurturing atmosphere, like a whole ecosystem for our children to stay connected to that song that they are, and that they have everything that they require inside of them for not just their own life moving through their bodies, but the creation of their life. And so what I heard you speaking about and what I heard Zach speaking about is really allowing that death moment, and that this COVID time, the metaphor of it, of, death and how we hold death and how we speak to our children about death, how we experience almost that moment that we are entering into this time of choosing death or life, right? And the declaration, like I felt it as you shared it, the declaration that I choose life and that I choose to parent for the emergence of life. And that is not always neat and tidy and acceptable to an old paradigm. It really is allowing our children to choose life, that they came here and that the expression of their beings, our good friend Deb Gleason, how she described it, I really want to bring that in too, because I feel like all of a sudden we're in this, like, there's you and me and Zach and Deb. When she shared, Gaia, the frequency of Gaia is intense. And that can look like an earthquake or a tsunami or to the extremes of what we would hold intensity to be. And on the same spectrum, just on the opposite end, the intensity of what it takes for Gaia to pop a wildflower out through barren soil every single year. And the ecosystem that you spoke about, I think, is really what I feel this conversation moving into, because it takes all of us. It takes this symphony of unique, awakened, connected voices. And I know the moment inside of me that I struggle and that I'm faced with many challenges is the moment that I forget that inside myself. I forget my own connection. And, when we look at Gaia, she doesn't ever question whether an earthquake is an appropriate thing or not. It's about making, in the Hawaiian tradition, ho'oponopono, it's about making right. So it's to look at ourselves as these intelligent beings, that we're not broken. There's nothing wrong with us. We are constantly inviting experiences into our life to bring ourselves into alignment with that expansive, powerful, ever-present, ever-ignited, engaged God force, life force, whatever language each person has for it. And that is our purpose, that is, living without an agenda. Just seems like such a radical thing to so many people. And yet it's become the norm for myself and my family. And I know, I know the journey that it continues to take to stay connected to what feels true and what feels right. And the intention for my children to have their own personal power, that is not allocated by me, that is something that they are and always have been in ownership of. And the moment that we are externally referenced and in this, space of fear and scarcity, and because it just takes a moment. I think the power of the process that, we've engaged over the years through the Well Systems journey is just the simplicity of, there is a process for me to leave myself and all of a sudden feel powerless in the world. And there is a process that invites me back, and that simplicity of taking a breath, telling myself the truth. So with my children, I love that you shared a Eula story. So last night for me, I was getting ready for bed. I was really exhausted, and I'm going in to tuck the kids in. My husband's already sound asleep. And both of them last night just had things to share, had things that were perhaps could have stayed secret inside of them. But it's like I keep watching them, and the moment that they are beginning to like have that disconnect from their own inner living and inner ecosystem and inner truth, you can tell it's kind of like this weird wonky experience of like what's going on and like what's happening. And so as I sat with each of them last night, it was as you described. It was just the simplicity of, first of all, just being present to myself, even in my, exhaustion, and just listening and just inviting the truth of their experience, and to recognize they can't get to the next truth until this one is acknowledged and witnessed. And how often as adults, I'll speak for myself, but do I stay stuck in, this story or this, very small invitation to myself, when I think what we're having the conversation about today is like inviting something so much greater that we know ourselves to be. And it takes what it takes, right? It really, and to recognize like if I am not actively shaping my world, somebody will do it for me.
Yeah.
So really taking this intense time and the intensity that it's inviting inside of each one of us, and deciding, do I want to use this to fight something or do I want to use this to create what it is that feels like it's in alignment, feels like a giant yes.
Yeah.
Does that spark anything?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, many things. One, it's very cool to hear my words back to me when you say, I said, I choose life. And I realize, I believe it was the same Zach Bush that I listened, it's about a 10-minute clip that I listened to. Yeah. So good. But the whole death process, I didn't make reference to this, but when you asked me, what was it like for you going into these sort of isolation times, I would describe like dying inside of myself, because in the times when I took myself into this externally referenced, looking outside of me space to find answers or find shoulds or shouldn'ts, or to tap into the news, in a way I had to allow ways of being to die inside of me to choose life again. And I wasn't making sense of it as it was happening in this way, but soon after I realized, like, it felt like a grieving and it felt like a letting go, and they were these tethers inside of me that I still had, somehow, to ways that weren't serving life. And so, the I choose life feels like only possible having gone through this this period of letting go and dying. And I've been around a few conversations where others will talk about on the other side of this, like in a light that's like, too bad it's all going to go back, or too bad, you know, like the earth is healing right now, too bad once business picks up again, that's going to be out the window. And for me, there is no going back to those aspects of myself that died early on in this time. So I feel very clear inside of myself that my way moving forward will never be what it was coming into this COVID-19 time. And so I kind of get up into my head and intellect, and if to like debate that one out with anybody, because that's for them to think or not think. But I'm noticing it moves things in me in a way that kind of is like, okay, you're really clear that's not in alignment for you. And really acknowledging the ways that no longer serve me, that aren't invited when I choose life. And so I do at times feel this like, come on, like there's a whole bunch of us feeling that way, right? Like collectively, we're not going to go there, right? And then I come back to like right here, that personal power you speak of, the Gaia inside of me. And I breathe. And it's all connected to my children. Because my way forward, of course, it's first for myself. It's first here. It's first my growth. But where I'm headed, where I am now, and what I will birth from this space is the life-giving world that my children came for. And I didn't conceive children until I was ready to create this world for them. And I had, I had a few, I'll never forget experiences early on with my firstborn that I felt like I fucked up. Like, who brings a child into this world? Why did I do this? And, those were probably my moments of, well, that was my truth. But also looking outside of me, calibrating for all the shit that I see and all the not life and destruction to the planet and each other and ourselves. And I'm like, how do I even stay connected to myself and create a safe space for a child? And but I know that spark of light, that conception happened because I had the capacity for something different. And if I think about both of my children's births, 2 girls, they, like, my partner and I stayed open to conception for quite a long time with both of them, and it didn't happen right away. And I was in my head like, wait, we're not that old, like we're really healthy, like this should happen like this, but it didn't both times. And I have no doubt that's why. It's like I had to engage everything I needed to engage inside of myself, feel everything, move through all that I would name as my shit, all the things I needed to look at straight on, feel, metabolize, and yeah, only when that space was clear, only when I knew myself as the creator of this part of my world, did my children come through.
There is so much in what you just said. I'm just allowing myself a moment to really, because I think, Rain, what you just said about, because I often think about, those that are listening to this podcast, not as a calibration, but more as an invitation, right? The first part of this podcast is called Take My Hand. And what I just heard you declare for yourself and invite for all of us to know is that we all have the capacity to create what it is that this life-giving world that we choose to bring forward from ourselves. It's almost like we have birthed our children, and they are already life itself. They are already all that they need, and we are that space for them to flourish. Right now I have eggs that are in an incubator in my living room, and I'm in awe. I am in absolute awe of the miracle of life as we candle them and we watch these incredible creatures coming to life. And they don't come to life because somebody has cracked the shell from the outside. They come to life because in the moment that they are ready, they crack open this shell, this barrier of what has kept them safe and what has kept them gestating and developing. And I really think about that in what you're talking about with this world. You and I have had many conversations, the world that we have held to be possible. And it isn't this airy fairy, wishful thinking. It's in the very tissue of our beings, in our bodies, we are birthing something different, which is why women, the connection, the desire that I have to be in these conversations continues to remind me, continues to be the space of reminder and invitation. And everything that you just shared reminded me that, of course, we have the capacity for the world that we've been gestating, that has been waiting for the conditions have needed to be right. We've needed to do such intense inner work. And that is available to any human being on this planet right now, of to not need to be afraid as things feel like they're unraveling and perhaps dying, because those systems, as I came to find out when I took my children out of the school system, it wasn't all of a sudden this magical, moment of, oh, now everything's just hunky-dory and easy. It was a deprogramming. It was a letting go. It was a journey of then the systems that I had put in place inside myself to hold all those outer systems as, I don't even have a word for it, as something that is legit and something that I just don't question. As I began to question that inside of myself, and as I, made a very conscious choice, man, I had to face inside of myself how strong that had been embedded in me. So I went on a bit of a tangent there, but it's like as I kind of bring this full circle for myself, it really is, it's choosing life, allowing the process of death to happen, allowing that unraveling, knowing that we're not broken, that this is part of a process. And I think when I look at it through the lens of nature and through Gaia, there's cycles and rhythms happening all the time. If I am not separate from that, how can I not embrace the cycles and rhythms inside of me? And your word surrender, it's like surrendering to, I can't surrender in just like a little way when I know myself to be Gaia. So it's a big surrender. And yeah, the gestation of a new world, and we have capacity for it. And when we come together, wow, that's for me where I'm seeing now. I thought I was really content living my, life in Hawaii, just here with my kids, frolicking on the beach. And I've definitely in this time come to reawaken even more powerfully to this is the time. That we're not speaking to something, we are speaking from something. And that something is the truth that we carry about what is not only what do we hold to be a possibility, what we know to be true. And nobody, the moment I calibrate for others, understanding that or validating that is the moment that I begin to waver inside myself. I'm still trying all that on for myself. It's still a journey. So, Raina, when you think about this conversation in its entirety, because I feel like we've pretty much gone through the cosmos and back, and yet never left. What comes to mind for you? What are some of your closing thoughts? And not to bring anything to a hard closure, but just to almost, it's like a spiral, almost like we've circled around and we're at the precipice of the next bigger loop.
Well, what's in my awareness right now is it has taken many experiences, conversations, intentional conversations, programs to discover a safety inside of myself to allow a very different journey than the trajectory that I was on years ago. And so I'm grateful for that journey. And it's allowed me to be here now and be with my children in this way. And I think what your invitation to have this conversation, and a conversation that will be shared, points to I don't know the wording yet, but it's one thing to create a magical bubble in the country, and then it's another thing to like tap into, oh, there's other magical bubbles and other people doing cool things. but to be having these kinds of conversations in a visible way. And there's the power inside of me that is, I don't have these conversations in a meaningful way very often, I don't have these conversations in a revealed way very often. So there's a personal power in that choice to share my truth out loud. And I think I'm sensing that's happening more in some of the other voices in the world that I'm tapping into right now and feeling and resonating with. And so, if I consider coming around the spiral and on a bigger loop, it's like all of what we've discussed and shared, and the amplification that happens as our voices start to like come together, and the momentum as the spiral broadens and expands is unknown and exciting and life-giving. So I'm really grateful for the invitation.
Thank you, Raina, for just showing up as you in your ever so grounded and magical, truthful, kind of this, what I feel like is this reveal and this acceptance of the reveal as it happens. It's like that this is life. And living life, I think, especially moving forward with less and less of a roadmap. I feel like what I shared at the beginning of, being this explorer, there's so much power and there's so much to be discovered. And that's why when we came into this conversation, I had no idea what we would talk about, but I had a knowing and a feeling, and it maps to the one I have right now. And so that always is my indicator that I am choosing the right path for myself. And like you said, to share this as an invitation, and the invitation always to each of you listening. We'll have Raina's website on the show notes, ways that if you want to reach out and connect, because we really, both of us have been on a very, very intentional, intense, accelerated journey of evolution for the past 10 years. And that is accessible to anyone who all of a sudden awakens to themselves and wants that knowledge, that access to themselves. Because I will never forget listening to this amazing woman speak and just coming to life, and then going and searching for, what does she know? And I think the brilliance in the Well Systems body of knowledge is it's a process. It's not that what I contain and what you contain it's the knowledge for ourselves, but that we know a process that allows us to access that for ourselves. So I wanted to share that after what you shared, because it's like to make this inclusive. So thank you for being in this conversation, and I look forward to many, many more. Until we meet again.
Okay.